Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Kelly, and I have two really special guests on with me today. As you come onto the live, please please share it, please say hello so that I can see who's joining me and where you're joining me from. Please say that. So today we're going to have a really good conversation about infertility. And I actually this is the first time I'm having a family member on one of these lives with me. So I want to welcome my sister-in-law, Joya. And then I have Dr. Cindy Duke. She is a fertility specialist, and she is an expert. I had a conversation with her maybe a few months ago about egg freezing and Black women, and it absolutely blew my mind. So I was like, I am going to have this conversation with her. So I'll let them introduce themselves, actually. Joya?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be on Dr. Kelly's show. Very happy to share my story, my journey to having my child. So I am a Foreign Service officer with the U.S. Department of State. For this conversation, everything I talk about will be from my personal view and not that of the U.S. government. But that means I move every couple of years to a new country. So should I just go right in, Kelly, and talk about kind of my journey a little bit?
Okay. Tell us about yourself, Dr. Cindy.
Oh, hi, everybody. So yes, I am Dr. Cindy Duke, and I'm so excited to be here today with Dr. Kelly and Joya. I am a practicing OBGYN, reproductive endocrinology, and infertility specialist. I'm based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and what that means is I primarily do women's healthcare with a focus on helping women and couples in general, and any patient really who's interested in either starting or growing their family or preserving their options for growing their families. And so I'm here today to talk about that and what we can do to improve our chances all around.
Great. So Joya, can you tell us your story about how you got to have my precious nephew, Jonah?
Absolutely. So, I had been married to Kelly's brother, John, for about 2 years. We were serving in East Africa in Djibouti, and we were trying to conceive for about 12 to 14 months with no success. So in between our overseas assignments, we were back in the United States and decided to just have a fertility consultation just to see what the issue was. So I am 36 years old. I had Jonah at 35, so a little bit older in my reproductive years, and I really just wanted to know what the issues were. So that first consultation was very kind of basic. John did a semen analysis. They talked about my family history. We did the genetic testing, which is an additional fee, but worth it. And they noted that I might possibly have fibroids. So I was like, okay. So then we moved to Eswatini in Southern Africa for our next assignment. And I was able to follow up there with a fertility clinic in South Africa. So from there, I'll go through the timeline quickly because I don't want to take up a ton of time. But our first consultations with them were around February 2017. Based on that prior assessment and their assessment, they determined that I should have a hysteroscopy to understand more about my reproductive system and what was going on in there and try to figure out the problem. Well, come to find out, after my surgery in March 2017, they discovered I had stage 4 endometriosis. So this is one of the more severe forms of it. And I did have some fibroids that they removed at that time. And so it was good to know that I was on the road to recovery. And they said, okay, if you're not pregnant within 6 months or so, come back. Well, I did not get pregnant within 6 months. So I came back and we explored some other options, including, sorry, I have notes here. It's called an HCG shot. I'm sure Dr. Cindy will elaborate on that a bit more, but basically that shot would stimulate my egg production a bit. And then we had, timed intercourse. And so it's a whole process. That didn't really work, but I think concurrently with that kind of program they put us on, we decided to do Whole30. And I, had read a little bit about that. A friend had done it and loved it. But for me, I just wanted to try one last ditch effort to try to conceive. So around December 2017, we were headed to Barbados and on vacation. And we
had so much fun on that trip.
And we had the best time of our lives. We had made an appointment in South Africa when we got back to start the IVF conversation, but we didn't need it because I got pregnant on that trip. And the rest is kind of history.
So Joya, can you share with me thank you for going over like all the different steps, but can you share with me the emotions that you had going through this process? Because I think the whole thing was about 2 years of different treatments.
Yeah, about a year and a half of a lot of periods. So the emotions were really all over the place. I can remember in particular an episode where I was about 5 days late on my period, and I was so hopeful and excited that this could be it, and it wasn't. And I was literally in the middle of a party that we were hosting, and I just went upstairs and cried because I couldn't really compose myself. So it's a lot, and our marriage was for sure tested in that time because we both wanted it so bad, and we could not understand why it wasn't happening for us.
And did you feel like you had an outlet, like someone to talk to, like how? Because I think like as women, we don't have these types of conversations enough. Like there's so many women who have issues with infertility or even miscarriage. Like we don't talk about these issues enough. Like how did you feel during this time? Did you feel like you were an island by yourself or?
I mean, a little bit. I was physically separated from family when we were going through this. So I think that made it harder. It is not something that you bring up over cocktail hour. I did a lot of journaling. I found some support systems online. And I did reach out to, I'm sure you and I talked quite a bit about some of that frustration, but it's true. There aren't a ton of outlets for Black women to express that. I think there's a presumption that we're all like hyper fertile in a way. And, people can look at each other and get pregnant, and that's just not the case.
It's not.
Yeah.
And I can share a little bit about my own story. So I didn't try to get pregnant, but as a single professional woman who was approaching 40, actually I was engaged to get married. How old was I? 35.
Yeah.
And at that time I thought, this is it. I have my husband. I'm going to have pregnant in like no time. And then when that relationship fell apart, I found myself single at 36, trying to get over that heartbreak, no man in sight. And I was like, I have to do something because I really want to be a mother. So I've never really shared this story publicly. I know I shared it on Dr. Cindy's podcast, and I was like, oh my God, I got way too vulnerable and way too open.
And it was very cathartic and helpful.
Yeah, but for me, the disappointment of, oh my God, I have to freeze my eggs. Why do I have to freeze my eggs? Why hasn't life turned out the way that I planned it, And then it was an emotional time because they're pumping you with hormones. My estrogen levels were over 4,000. So I felt like if I was pregnant, but I really wasn't pregnant. So I was emotional. I was doing it by myself. So I was going into the office and sitting in the waiting room with couples while I'm doing it by myself. And then there weren't many women of color there. My doctors weren't, they weren't Black doctors, and debate it or not, that makes a difference when you see someone who looks like you. It makes a difference. Just putting that out there. I'm going to speak my mind today, okay?
That's right.
So, all those emotions of being by myself, it was physically draining. Coming on to the end, I had severe abdominal pain. I remember still having to go to work. I have to make like 6:30 appointments in the morning so that I could then leave the doctor's office to go to work. I had to do ultrasounds. I had to do blood work. Imagine working, feeling like you're pregnant, right? Yeah. And then the first time I did it, it was not very successful. And I had to advocate for myself, even though I was a physician. That was one of the very first times that I was disappointed with the medical system, because even as a physician, I still felt that I wasn't treated well. I'm not going to go into all those details. So I had to do it a second time. And the second time was a lot more successful, but it was an ordeal. Up to this day, if I see their number, I literally get anxious. Like I have PTSD about what happened. A lot of my friends, I remember going on a trip with 4 doctors, and 3 out of the 4 of us had frozen our eggs. So a lot of you guys who are watching me, physicians, professional women, if you really want to have a kid, I would say go ahead and do it. Even though it was an ordeal for me, I don't regret doing it at all because I have my backup plan, I guess. And I have options. I definitely have options. So Dr. Cindy, thank you for coming on. I wanted you to put some faces to this topic. Joy and I have kind of different stories, but all along the fertility journey. Dr. Cindy, talk to us. We can start with the egg preservation. When should you consider freezing your eggs? What other options do we have? Anything you want to talk about that?
Well, what I say to women is the earlier you can freeze your eggs, the better. And there's no ideal time because I know for a lot of patients, egg freezing is a novel concept, right? For a lot of women hearing today, today's either the first day they've really thought about it, or it's going to be the first day they finally say, maybe this is for me. And so I don't blame anybody for coming to it too late. I think you come to it as soon as you find out about it. Ideally, in a perfect world, we'll say, try to freeze eggs in your 20s. But that's more based on the principle that as women, we're born with all of our eggs. We don't make new ones. And so your eggs are the same age you are. Typically, they're a little bit older because they're formed even before you're born. And so, we say the younger you are, the better it is to freeze your eggs because your eggs would perform better. And as a result, you need less eggs usually to achieve your family building goals. But that said, I have patients who freeze eggs in their 30s. The vast majority of women who freeze their eggs across the United States, and I would dare say across the world, who are freezing their eggs, they're in their 30s. The truth is, egg freezing has only been considered standard of care, meaning recognized by the Food and Drug Administration as a standard therapy as of January 2013. So it's only 7 years old. And so if you're sitting at home beating up on yourself, wondering why you didn't do this 10 years ago, don't. It wasn't around 10 years ago. If you're sitting at home saying, well, why didn't I do it 7 years ago? Well, it was only approved 7 years ago. And sadly, in terms of marketing, there was a lot that we needed to do to market. In terms of marketing, a lot of the marketing was directed at women of certain economic strata as well as socioeconomic strata in terms of demographic, race, profession, part of the country. And so I wouldn't give up on myself. What I would say is don't sit at home and wonder about the what if. If you're interested, now's the time to make an appointment. You can make an appointment to see a fertility specialist like me via telemedicine, virtual clinic. You don't necessarily have to go into the office. The key things to know about freezing your eggs, though, when you're going in to talk about your egg freezing, there are 5 things I like to emphasize. So the first thing is talking to your doctor to find out, has their clinic had success with thawing eggs, right? So it's not just enough that a clinic can offer to freeze your eggs. You need to be confident that they can thaw and successfully have a chance at a pregnancy. That's the first thing. Now, some clinics will argue, well, egg freezing isn't a high chance of pregnancy to begin with. That's not the question. Your question is, do you have babies? If that clinic doesn't yet have babies from thawed, frozen eggs, it could give you pause.
So do we lose eggs during the thawing process?
Yes, not every egg will survive a thaw. In addition, the younger the egg, the better they perform. And so what we actually recommend, and this is what I was going to get to later too, is if you're freezing your eggs, based on your age, you may need to freeze more than your friend. So maybe your 25-year-old sister goes in and she freezes 10 eggs and she feels good about it. You go in and you're 39 and you're being told you need to freeze somewhere in the order of 20 plus eggs. That is not because the doctor's incompetent. It's not because the clinic isn't good at what they're doing. It's based on what we know about eggs, the age of eggs, how they perform, the chances of pregnancy in general as eggs age, whether they're frozen or fresh. But more importantly, the chances of pregnancy with a child that may not have issues related to chromosome, like Down syndrome, etc. And so there are a number of things that factor into this. And so, of course, when you freeze your eggs, it's important to make sure that everyone knows egg freezing isn't a guarantee that you're going to have a baby in the future. It is not a guarantee. And so that's always the second thing I like to explain. But it certainly boosts your chances, especially as you age. Because if you can freeze your eggs at 35, if you come back at 42 needing to try to get pregnant, your 35-year-old eggs have a much higher chance of yielding you a pregnancy than 42-year-old, 45-year-old eggs at that point. And so that's why we're emphasizing this.
So I was told that I needed 6 eggs for a live birth.
Mm-hmm.
So my first cycle, I got 6 eggs, and I was like, I know maths really well, right? Yeah. That does not seem to be enough, right? Mm-hmm. I would say at least 12-ish, maybe.
At 35, I actually counsel my patients that we're going to need somewhere between 12 to 15 eggs to give ourselves a really high chance at them successfully going on to have a baby that they take home. Because, you know, the way we measure success at a fertility clinic may be different from how you, the patient, measure success. So a fertility clinic's measure of success, we have a number of measures, actually. So one first measure is we got eggs. Yay, we're happy. The second measure is that we were able to freeze mature eggs, because only mature eggs at this stage in our scientific advancement have been proven that we can successfully fertilize them in the laboratory. So it's not just that I get eggs, but how many of them were mature. And I've certainly talked to patients who are like, woohoo, I had 20 eggs taken out. I then review their report and I see only 5 or 6 mature eggs were frozen, which is the number that actually counts. And so, you know, number of eggs is one thing, but it's the quality of the egg and meaning the maturity. That's the first thing. But the other thing is the age of the egg. And so if you're 25 to 30 and you froze 5 to 6 eggs, absolutely. I'm going to have a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to have at least one baby out of this.
If you use those 25-year-old eggs at 42 or 45?
Your chance of having an embryo for transfer is still high. Chance of pregnancy, if we make sure you're otherwise healthy, yes, the chance is still high. And this is why it's even the same principle that we use for donor eggs in women over 40. Because again, a younger egg will yield better chances at an embryo, better chances at pregnancy, with all other things being equal, meaning if we check for the fibroids like Joya had, if we check for the endometriosis, if we check for the polyp, we check for everything else, your chance of implantation in a live birth baby is really good. The younger the egg, but not everybody has access to younger eggs. So that's where, you know, right now, I would say if you were to ask fertility specialists the world over, which group of women are we focused on getting the message out to right now about egg freezing? And we would universally say 35 and older. And it's because we're still playing catch up, right? It's been 7 years, yes, but we're still playing catch up. Because remember, our 35-year-olds today, our 37-year-olds today, they were 30 at the time that egg freezing was approved. Many of them hadn't heard of it. Others were still figuring out their lives. We were actively trying to capture the ones who at the time were in their upper 30s. So we're still playing catch up. And so while I have younger patients coming in to freeze their eggs, and I'm excited when that happens because I know they're making a good decision for themselves, I also spend a lot of my efforts like this and marketing, etc., talking to women who are in their 30s, approaching 40, to really explain that time is limited, egg number is limited, because as we age, our egg numbers decline. It doesn't matter how good we look. It doesn't, I mean, like Dr. Kelly here, she looks like she's 28, right? But her eggs are the age that her birth certificate says. And so we have to keep that in mind, you know. And I have to say, as a woman, I've had to reconcile and grapple with that myself as a fertility specialist. I've had to look in that mirror and remind myself, Cindy, you're not the age you feel you are. Go with the real number. Because I think, you know, we do such a good job preserving ourselves, preserving our health, preserving our health efforts, that we tend to assume the eggs are doing the same. And that's not how it works at all. And eggs are not a self-renewing process. So yeah, as you get older, you need more eggs. So like if I have a 40-year-old woman looking to freeze her eggs, we're looking for double-digit mature eggs for freezing. And I'm very honest with patients in that sometimes we need to do it more than once. If you're in your 20s, we probably just need to do one cycle and we'll have enough eggs. But if we're over 35, definitely 38 to 40, and we're looking for realistic chances at pregnancy and live birth, we need to freeze more eggs. We need the double digits. It's just the honest truth. And I know that's hard because for a lot of people, finance becomes an issue. And so at clinics like mine, we've come up with packages. We've made sure our price points are really affordable so that you can get to that stage. Also,
That's the thing. Like a lot of insurance companies, right? Even though, so first thing, some people see fertility as, pray and let God answer, or when someone takes charge of their fertility, I've heard, you're trying to be God or that kind of stuff. But fertility, is finite, one, and two, is like any other infertility, like any other medical issue.
Yes.
So I still don't understand why insurance companies don't cover it better. And
we have insurance companies that do, but I agree. And that's a big part of our advocacy. Now, again, keep in mind, while we know that infertility is a disease, egg freezing in particular was not even a recognized disease treatment by the Food and Drug Administration until 7 years ago. So there's still a lot of information that we need to put into the public space, that we need to take to our legislators to remind them. I have definitely seen that we're having better luck the more legislators who have to cope with this disease. I know it's unfair. It's unfair that many times we have to wait until our lawmakers suffer the consequence of something before they recognize that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. But at the same time, with more and more people having to face this, more of our lawmakers, either they themselves or their children or their loved ones, are having to grapple with this too. And so we are seeing more and more places cover it. But what we're also seeing is more employers coming on board. So as a nation, as women, we are having babies later in life. We also know the impact of motherhood and having babies on the workforce. And for a lot of professional women, unfortunately, we made choices. We either chose to delay childbearing or put it off so that we can focus on career. And yet for many of us, once we start having our families, we're finding ourselves having to pull out of the workforce. And I think for a lot of employers, they notice that too. They also notice that they're losing really great employees. They're losing employees for whom they invested a lot into to train them. And so now they've come up with a lot of plans that cover fertility. And so a lot more employers are covering fertility benefits, and more than you know. So many employers nowadays are participating in these shared models for covering fertility benefits. So you may have Blue Cross Blue Shield through your employer, as an example. Let's use Amazon. But Amazon has a contract with a fertility financing company known as Candid, to put it simply. And so you actually have to talk to your human resources through your employer and say, okay, I know we have Blue Cross, but do we have anything that covers fertility so that you can be signed up for that additional benefit? And a lot of employers are doing that. And many times they're also cognizant of the fact that many women need more than one cycle. And so now they cover multiple cycles. But that's like Dr. Kelly's saying, it's not enough, right? So take Joya's case, for example. Joya's in the military. We have a lot of women in the military who are struggling with fertility issues. They're deployed around the world. Surprisingly, the military actually has fertility doctors that the military pays to train to be fertility specialists. There just aren't that many.
Joya?
Sorry, I'm with State Department, not military.
It's federal then. Federal.
Yeah, federal. Yeah.
While a lot of federal employees have excellent health benefits, for many of them, infertility isn't one.
Right.
And so it's time that we start talking about that, because you guys are really putting your lives on the line for us in multiple ways. And I think it's only fair that the coverage extend to infertility. And the way we get that is to first get people to recognize that it's a disease. It's a disease that affects 1 in 8 couples. When it comes to miscarriage, 1 in 4 women that you've talked
to. You guys hear those stats? So 1 in 8 couples have issues with infertility, and 1 in 4 women have a first trimester miscarriage.
Correct.
So these are things that we don't talk about, but it's so common. And you can imagine, like, this is why I'm doing this, kind of to break some of the stigma surrounding these issues, because we as women need to, as Black women, we need to start to support each other. So Dr. Cindy, let's go on to Dr. Joya's story.
Yes.
She talked about doing the different tests.
Yes. So I like what they did. I think for a lot of people, what we don't realize is that infertility can be caused by a host of things. And, Dr. Kelly alluded to those who say, oh, you're playing God. The truth is, if you're really religious, every religious text talks about someone suffering with infertility, whether it's the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, you go through any religious text, and historically, it tells you that infertility isn't new. People have struggled with issues related to pregnancy. If you're Christian or Judeo-Christian, or even Muslim, right, the Abrahamic religions, you read about issues of blood. You hear about women bleeding and having issues with bleeding, which probably meant they were having fibroids.
Fibroids, yeah.
So although the Bible and your religious books didn't mention the word fibroid, they're probably referring to fibroids. They're referring to heavy periods. You're hearing them refer to women trying to get pregnant and not getting pregnant.
I think it was her name, yeah.
Sarah and Rachel, and you're hearing all these stories, and you're reading about the sadness they felt. And so I love when Joya shared that her period, she said the word period like it was a conviction. And it's because it's true. For a lot of women struggling with infertility, your period suddenly becomes an indictment, a sort of a reminder that this month I didn't do it.
Yeah.
For me, not trying to get pregnant, now having my period is beginning to have a little bit of that feeling as well.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah. Another one's happening. Nothing,
Another egg gone.
It's important that we talk about that, because I have this conversation with my staff a lot. Because I think, many patients, right? We have patients who 7, 8, 9 years, they were at home trying to get pregnant, never sought a fertility specialist. And then they come to see us and they want everything done like yesterday. And so sometimes the patients are like, wasn't this one the one who waited 9 years? Now they're like, chop. But I think because they're experiencing what we're talking about here, which is that period doesn't feel like, oh, I'm a woman and my body is cycling and beautiful biology. No, that period it's like a taunt. It's taunting you, saying, yeah, you didn't do it last month, try again. And so it's really important that you have someone to talk to, but you also have someone to just say, I understand what you're feeling. And so, yes, the workup usually involves checking blood work to see what your egg number, your ovarian reserve is. It usually involves an ultrasound to look at your pelvis. We're looking at your uterus or the womb. We're looking at your ovaries to see how many eggs you have. We're also checking other hormones like your thyroid. Because your thyroid plays a big role in fertility. We're checking things like vitamin D, which Dr. Kelly and I both agree, it's technically a hormone, but we call it a vitamin, but it's something made in your body that has a lot of pretty important effects in your body, including reproduction. We check your partner. So for a heterosexual couple, it is not enough for the woman alone to get checked out.
It's true.
It's true. And, especially in couples and communities of color, immigrant communities, there's this belief that the burden of pregnancy and childbearing lands squarely and solely on the female partner, which is so untrue. And it really does the couple no favors, because the truth is 50% of the time, half of the time, the infertility issue involves something with the woman and the man. It's both of them. So why do we care about the man? We care about the man because remember I just told you that for women, we're born with all of our eggs. We don't make new ones. I know it sounded pretty dire. For guys, it's a little bit different. For most guys, they have issues related to their sperm production that we can change. If we identify it, we can help him make more sperm. We can go in and take sperm and look at it and pick the best looking sperm. There are lots of things we can do because guys make sperm their whole lives if they're making sperm. And so in that context, let's say we have a couple where they both have something going on, but we can improve things in the guy. We've just improved the couple's chances significantly. And so it's important that we check out your male partner. And I can't tell you how many couples, particularly women of color, come to my clinic. Black women, women from Arabic culture, women from the Middle East, women from India, the Caribbean. And what they say is, I'm here to get checked out. If nothing's wrong with me, then my husband will get checked. And that is a misguided way of thinking, because it's not whether something is wrong with you. It's that 50% of the time there's something going on with you and something going on with him. So whether or not there's something going on with you, that doesn't mean he is absolved. It's also not enough to say, well, he has children already, so he doesn't have a problem. That's not true for a number of reasons. First reason is I've had a few guys who come in who convince me that they have kids, and then on testing, I know those kids aren't genetically his. Right?
Now what?
Hold up now.
Like, I have some guys who they've never actually made sperm their whole lives, which means
Wow.
the kids that were fostered were fathered by other sperm. Right? So that's one. It's a small case. It's not a lot. It's not like 10% that happens. But the other thing is, although I said guys keep making sperm, as guys age, the sperm numbers drop. The sperm the particular function.
Hey, Cindy, your audio is going in and out a little bit.
That's a little weird. Okay. I just adjusted the microphone. So
Okay.
for guys, the big thing that we need to know about guys is as you age, your sperm numbers can drop. Your testicular function can drop. In the United States especially, there's also a new movement and a trend toward guys using testosterone to boost stamina, boost sexuality.
Come to me to get it, by the way.
But here's the thing, right? Testosterone is essentially male birth control.
It makes you infertile. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a guy and you're taking testosterone, there's a very high chance that it's going to indirectly cause your testicles to stop making sperm. And so, I live in Vegas, Southern California, this part of the country. Guys, they all want to look a certain way. And they're all, going to the gym and competing with people at the gym. Hold on, I'm going to pull out this microphone because I think it's working against me. And so the big thing to know, guys, is there are all these things we can reverse. Some of them we can stop with testosterone and allow their body.
It's still kind of.
Okay, hold on. For a lot of the guys, we need to stop the testosterone and allow their bodies to actually go ahead and start making testosterone and sperm again. But for others, we actually need to prescribe them medication to jumpstart their sperm production. And so it's really important that if you're in a partnership, you're in a relationship, even if he's had kids, that's not enough. And the same goes for women, of course. There's some women who are like, I had kids 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I didn't even have to try, and I got pregnant. Well, there's something called secondary infertility, where 16% of couples who previously had a child or patients who previously had a child without any difficulty go on to have issues getting pregnant. And so that's known as secondary infertility. It is real. It happens. And we have solutions, but we do need to see you to help you.
So I have a question. Please type, guys, I don't see any questions on the Dr. Kelly Wood page. That's the one that I see on my screen right now. So please type in. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. We just said that 1 in 8 couples have issues with infertility. Yes. 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage. So this affects all of us. No need to be embarrassed or have shame about this anymore. So Dr. Sherry said, how does stress affect semen and sperm?
Well, what we tell people is, although we don't believe there's a direct impact of stress on male or female infertility, we do know a few things about other things that stress impacts that can then impact fertility. So as Dr. Kelly knows, if you're stressed, for a lot of people, your cortisol levels, with cortisol is sort of the stress hormone, it goes up. As cortisol goes up, your body then, in its attempt to deal with its new stress, redirects its non-essential function, right? And so for male and females, the truth is that your body does not see reproduction as a primary function when it's under stress or when it's sick. And so your fertility, your chances of conceiving will decrease. And so you might notice for a guy who is under stress, his diet changes, his activity changes, all those things change, which in turn can lead to decreased sperm and testosterone production, which changes your libido, etc. And so that's how it can indirectly impact your chances of conceiving. For women, we know people have actually studied it, and they looked at periods of stress and high cortisol and saw that you're less likely to ovulate when your cortisol levels are higher. And so again, what I don't want someone listening though is hearing this and saying, "Oh my God, I'm stressed out," and then they start stressing out.
Being stressed out.
And it now becomes just this horrible cycle and you start spiraling. So what I tell people is, if you have stress, let's figure out ways to manage your stress, right? For some of us, ways to manage stress is as simple as journaling or going for a walk or hanging out.
Joya did, right?
Like
Or going to Barbados.
Or going to Barbados. Yes.
You're on a catamaran cruise, right?
For others, it's going to a yoga class. For others, it's going to get acupuncture. And so what it's important is figuring out what works for your stress level. For a lot of couples, it's actually just reminding yourself that you're still a couple and you're not just two baby-making machines now, right?
Yeah.
And so keeping some sense of normalcy in your relationship, date night, making sure you go on date night, maybe committing to going out at least once a week and not talking about the baby making at all. I think that's why we also hear a lot of patients describe what Joya did, because they went on vacation and they came back pregnant. And no, I'm not saying vacations are a fertility cure, but I think for many people, if part of what's going on is stress, schedules, a lot of other social factors, then a vacation helps you change that. The same happened during this pandemic. I have a few patients who have conceived at home while on lockdown, and
Wow.
they've been trying for years. And so it's not the vast majority of them, obviously, but for some of them, that's what it took. And I think that's a big thing. But the other part that Joya hit on was lifestyle change, which is she talks about doing Whole30. And we know now more than ever that diet has an impact on your hormones. It has an impact on how your body processes sugar, energy, how it messages itself. And so diet is important. I like that she said Whole30, because certainly that's what we recommend. We recommend eating whole grains, whole foods, cutting back on dairy, cutting back on products that are using inorganic materials, so hormones, antibiotics, etc. You want to be hormone-free, antibiotic-free. Exercise, so getting a regular exercise regimen. I tell my patients, if they're not used to exercising, we start with the basics, which is just, let's try to do 10,000 steps a day, 6 days a week. So I don't need you to go spend for the expensive gym membership. I don't need you to go spend for the expensive trainer. If you're someone who feels like you have those funds and you truly believe you're going to follow through on it, then sure, you can do that. But I recommend starting simple. Start by just getting yourself moving more. 10,000 steps per day, 6 days a week. Give yourself a cheat day. Drinking more water. Water is what your cells use. Every cell in your body uses water to process energy. That includes your eggs. It includes the cells that take care of your eggs, or what we call your egg sitters. It's important. If you're someone with fibroids can and do impact fertility depending on where they're located. And so it's really important for that to be evaluated, especially in women of color, specifically women of Black heritage.
I was going to ask about that. We're more likely to have a fibroid, right?
To have fibroids, we're more likely to have multiple fibroids. And when it comes to fibroids, it's all about location, location, location. So what's a fibroid? A fibroid is a benign tumor benign, meaning not cancerous, that grows within the womb, and it can grow in the wall of the womb. It can grow in the cavity where a baby grows, the part that bleeds every month, or it can grow on the outer surface, sort of within the abdominal cavity. The one that we worry about the most is the one that's in the cavity. It could be causing you to have heavy periods. For a lot of women with fibroids, they don't know they have fibroids until it's either caused them heavy bleeding that required them to get a transfusion or get admitted to the hospital or started on IV intravenous iron. But for others, they discover their fibroids when they're trying to get pregnant or they've had miscarriages or preterm deliveries. And so it's important that we identify fibroids and address them appropriately. It's important to talk to someone who's a specialist in fibroids, though, because not everybody who diagnoses a fibroid knows how to treat with it and keep your uterus healthy at the same time.
And can they reappear? So I had my endometrius surgery and the fibroids removed, but that was several years ago now. So I'm kind of wondering, like, can it come back?
Yeah. So the thing is, fibroids can recur, meaning if one's been removed, obviously that one's not coming back, but others can grow in place. Fibroids grow in response to estrogen, which is the main hormone being made by your ovary every month as it tries to cycle to potentially have a baby. And so every month, fibroids are getting that signal to grow. And so new ones grow as your uterus keeps restructuring itself. And so, yes, we say to patients that 65% of women who have fibroids removed will have new ones in place within 5 years. So that's about the median time you'll hear most people describe having symptoms again from their fibroids is about a 5-year period in.
Hi, Joya. Was there other question that you have for Dr. Cindy?
So we're now thinking about number 2 and trying for number 2.
You're thinking about number 2 now.
Yes. But secondary infertility is real. We've started back on Whole30. We have always been very active with exercising. But what should I be thinking about for second round?
Yeah. So I would say, we go by our definitions, right? So if you are 35 years and older, we recommend that if you've tried for 6 months of unprotected regular intercourse and you're not pregnant,
You consider to be regular intercourse.
So regular would be every other day around the time of ovulation if you're having regular periods. So let's say your cycle is 28 days long. Every 28 days you start bleeding. Then first of all, rule of thumb is if you have regular periods, you ovulate about 14 days before the first day of your period. So for example, if you have a 28-day period, you're ovulating around day 14. If you have a 30-day period, it's around day 16. Right? And that's important because for a lot of people, when they read the textbooks, we always say day 14. But day 14 is actually assuming someone's having a 28-day cycle. If your cycle is reliably 32 days, if your cycle is reliably 32 days, you're going to ovulate on day 18. And
that's important to know. I didn't know that.
It's important to know that because,
Yeah, I was just going to add that's very true because seems like we were kind of missing my window a bit. Like we were actually having intercourse a bit later and I was ovulating a bit earlier in the cycle. So there is a lot to that. And I use an app to track and it's not perfect, but
But it's important because, there are some women, so we tell people the average is 28 days, but there are some women whose cycle is 26 days from the dot every month from the day they start their periods or 25 days, If you're a 25-day cycle, you're ovulating more likely around day 11. You're ovulating, if you're 26, you're ovulating day 12. And so again, if you're someone who's planning for day 14 every month because of what you've read online, but you're a 26-day cycle, you're already ovulating before you start trying. So what I usually tell my patients is if you have regular cycles, they're pretty much on the nose. And of course, cycles can vary a little bit, but I'll go into that later. But let's go with regular, you're on the nose, then you should be trying to have intercourse every other day, starting about 4 days before when you expect to ovulate. So if you're a day 14 ovulator, then on day 10, every other day, you should be trying, right? I think a few myths need to be debunked. The first thing is, unfortunately, a small group of people out there think you're ovulating when you're bleeding. That's not true. So when you're having a period, that's not your ovulation. That's actually an end of your last month's cycle. And so that's not the time. If you're doing it then, you're missing your window completely. If you are someone who only has start attempting when you think your mucus has changed. For some women, the mucus changes aren't as specific as for others. And so you may be in a support group and somebody tells you, yeah, every one of my babies, I just checked my mucus and I was able to track it to a T. You don't need the tracking apps. You don't need the ovulation kit. You don't need to see a doctor. Well, that's not true. Each person's mucus is different. One, two, it's really hard to track mucus. And so it may take you months before you finally figure out what's going on with your cervical mucus and the changes. Secondly, actually, was that two? That was number two. Thirdly, right, for a lot of women, your cycle may vary by a day or two. And so, maybe this month you had a period, like for the first 3 months in the year, your period was always on the fourth day of the month.
Right.
And February happened and it's a shorter month. And so it's now changed all the days that follow in the year. And so you're like, oh, my periods are usually on the 4th, but all of a sudden now they're on the 6th, the 8th. And I get a lot of patients who come in to see me because they're like, my periods have gone crazy. And I go through it and I'm like, no, your period's the same. So that's where an app helps you, because the app is counting the actual interval, the days between your period. And of course, day 1 of your period is the first day of bright red bleeding. So some women spot. They just spot for days before they start bleeding. Your period doesn't start until the day you started bleeding, first day. Even if you started having that flow at 11 p.m. at night, that's your day 1. So it's important to know that, because if you're counting and you're not really using an app, that's how you miss your window again. Because you started counting from the day you were spotting, but maybe you spot for 5 days. So
Right.
off by 5 days. So it's important to know that. But then there's another big group of women that both Dr. Kelly and I see, which is these are the ones who have something called polycystic ovary syndrome. And that impacts up to 11% of women. And actually, there's some data coming out of parts of the Caribbean, parts of Africa that say that maybe up to 20% of some of these populations have polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. And so in those cases, you may have periods that are regular, but you're not necessarily releasing. And that's because your brain's messaging, or what we call luteinizing hormone, your LH surge, is inadequate to tell your ovary to release that egg. And so for that reason, you may need HCG, like Joya was describing, which is the hormonal version of mimicking what the brain usually does, called the LH surge, to tell your ovary release an egg. Now, I know in a lot of countries outside of the United States, they use HCG a little different from how we use it in the United States. So here in the US, for the most part, we use HCG when it's time to release the egg or trigger shot. But in a lot of other countries, they use a little bit of HCG or low dose HCG daily for a week to 12 days leading up to ovulation, trying to prime or stimulate the ovaries. We don't use it in the same way here. Many other countries, they use it in part because it's less expensive, but we don't use it because also the results are mixed. So that's why I smile when Joya said she was using HCG, because that is how many other countries use it. But it has a role, and that's why they're doing it. It's to help the ovaries get that final message that says mature the egg. Because again, only a mature egg can be fertilized. It's only a mature egg that is supposed to be released at the time of ovulation. But if you don't have a mature egg, you're not getting pregnant. If you're not releasing it, you're not getting pregnant. And so that's important too.
Joy, any other questions that you have?
Oh my goodness. I don't, not really. I mean, this has been really informative for me, and and also very familiar. One thing I am really grateful for is being back in the U.S. and having access to Black women doctors. I now have a Black OBGYN. In South Africa, my doctors were white men, and they were fantastic as well. But there's nothing like having a Black doctor to really walk you through that process.
That kind of leads me into my next question. So when you and I had that first discussion, Dr. Cindy, on your podcast, you were telling me that there were some differences in terms of how Black women respond to fertility treatments, in terms of our outcomes, in terms of even Black women knowing that this is an option, egg freezing and even IVF. Can you share a little bit more about the disparities that you have seen even within your own field?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do have disparities within the field of OBGYN specifically, and then infertility, absolutely. So a few things that we know. Let's talk, for example, about fibroids. In so much as we know Black women disproportionately have more fibroids, meaning are more likely to be diagnosed with fibroids when they're checked. The question is the checking. And what we know actually from very good research studies is Black women, it takes an extra year or two before a Black woman is diagnosed with fibroids, meaning told she has fibroids, before her non-Black counterparts, which doesn't jive, right? If they are the ones who tend to have it, how come they're the ones less likely to know about it? And so that in itself is a disparity because its impact can be lasting. They could be having heavy periods, tired, fatigued, not really functioning at work, and they don't know why. They don't know why, and nobody's checked. So I can't tell you how many women I've told for the first time they have large fibroids, and they're shocked, and they're like, "But I was checked last year. I was checked 2 years ago. I had an ultrasound 6 months ago. What do you need?"
The funny thing is, when I had one of my first ultrasounds, because you have to have one like every other day.
Yes.
The one tech was like, "Oh, did they mention to you have a small fibroid?" I was like, "What?" Like, this is day 4 of these ultrasounds, and no one bothered to tell me that I even had one. Like, how is this even possible that you don't tell a patient a result?
But it happens, and that's a good question. I think, and I have so many patients who express that shock. Patients who are just like Dr. Kelly and Joya, which is highly professional, very acutely aware of their bodies, their health. Like, it's not that they go to the clinic and tune out, right? Yeah. And so when I tell them, "Oh, I just found a fibroid and it's likely been there for a while," and they look at me like, "You're making this up." I just know you are, because I'm aware of my body and nobody ever told me this. And so it's important to advocate for yourself, really. And what I tell every patient, and your doctor should be an advocate for this as well, a proponent for it, is you should get a report of every test you have done. You are entitled.
Again, for people.
You should get a report of every test that you have done. If your doctor did an ultrasound on you, you need a copy of the report. If you've had an MRI, you need a copy of the report. And it's not because you're trying to do a gotcha on the doctor. No, it's good to have it for your records. And sometimes you may see something on the report and you're like, "Wait a minute, nobody told me that word." Because, unfortunately, most doctors' offices, all we tell you is the results were normal. So if we saw a small fibroid, maybe they didn't tell you there's a fibroid there because it was small, but there's a fibroid there. You need to know. And so seeing your report is helpful. And it's also helpful because if you move, or like Joya, you travel from country to country, it helps people start from a new place as opposed to always going back to the same place to start looking you up again. They can start building on the information you present them as opposed to starting from scratch. So it's really important to have your own reports. The other thing that I think, for a lot of women of color is we are afraid of medicine. We're afraid of all the historical things we've heard about that have led to untoward interactions for ourselves, our parents, our grandmothers, our sisters, the media, our idols. You think of Serena Williams, etc. And so we're going through our doctor's visits afraid of what they might tell us, afraid of what they will choose not to tell us as well. And that can lead to some really unfortunate interactions. So what's important is writing down your questions before you go. I really advocate for that. If you're going to go see your doctor, think about your questions before you go. That way, if you're someone who, when you show up, you get, anxious, or you look around the office and you're like, they don't even want me here. I don't see any depiction of me here. It helps to have it written down so that you can have that conversation. And, also, if you're going to a clinic and you're like, I wish they showed more diversity, tell them. Tell them. If you're in an OBGYN clinic and they actually show baby pictures on the wall and none of the baby pictures represent a baby that you might have, you might want to just say, hey, doc, would you consider a little bit more diversity on your wall? Would you consider a little bit more diversity on your website? I don't think it's usually intentional. For a lot of clinics, they farm out marketing to people who aren't even in medicine to do the marketing or do the decoration. Some of them, they're farming it out to their family members too. But a lot of people don't realize that the doctor's office is a space for everybody. So it's either you don't offend some, and don't put up pictures at all. Like, I don't actually have pictures up in my office for a couple reasons. One is it means I'll have to find pictures of lots of babies because we have so many. Want my patients to know we're diverse. But actually, the reason why I don't have pictures up is not that reason. My reason is I have a lot of patients, like Dr. Kelly described. They're coming in to freeze eggs, either because they either had a relationship that ended, they don't need that reminder right now, or if someone who was diagnosed with cancer and coming in to freeze eggs. And the last thing I want is to bombard them with the possibility of something that they're not yet ready to think about. And so that's my take on it. But if you're in a clinic and you feel like all the paraphernalia is screaming at you that this isn't a space for you, it's good feedback to give. You don't have to say it angrily, just give feedback.
What about the biological differences? Do we respond the same way to the hormonal treatments?
Yes. So what we've noticed is that women of color, Black women in particular, when studied, and Asian women tend to require higher doses of the hormones. And it might be partly body habitus, right? As Black women, many of us are built a little bit more sturdily compared to our non-Black women. We might be fluffier. And so we may need a more dosing. I think it's important that that is taken into account. And I know more and more physicians are. I know there are some clinics where they have BMI cutoffs as well. They tell you can't really undergo certain treatments if you're above a certain number. I think that's a tricky one. I certainly don't subscribe to that belief system. I do have conversations, though, with my patients over certain BMI, but it's more about their general health, the risk it may pose to their pregnancy, the risk it poses to their long-term health. And of course, my goal when I'm getting someone pregnant is not just so I can check off that I've yielded yet another baby into the world, but I want a healthy mom who can raise her babies. And so that's important to me.
So one thing that I felt during my whole egg freezing process was that I was just another number, that I was kind of put on a production line where I was part of a protocol and wasn't really an individual. Yeah. So from hearing you speak, I know that's not how you practice, but can you talk a little bit about how you individualize care for your patients?
So for me, I definitely individualize. So there's no one cookie cutter protocol. I know there are a lot of clinics where it is cookie cutter. If you're a certain age, if you have a certain AMH test, which is the anti-Mullerian hormone, which is our surrogate for measuring or estimating your ovarian reserve, how many eggs you might have, they just put you on a dose and that's it. That's your dose. For me, I would start in such a place to determine a baseline dose, but then I look at my patient. So I'm looking at her age, I'm looking at her weight, I'm looking at whether she's previously done these cycles before and what was her success. That way, I'm not just pulling from a cookie cutter because it may not work for her, And so it's important to keep that in mind. There's some patients who have underlying diseases. So if my patient has underlying autoimmune disease or underlying endometriosis, like Joya described, so stage 4 endometriosis is pretty advanced. Endometriosis is an inflammatory process that can actually cross through your eggs. It can impact your ovaries. It can make it harder for your body to respond. to hormonal medication. So I keep that in mind. And so I'm factoring that in so much so also I know endometriosis, like fibroids, responds to high estrogen. And so my endometriosis patients, I actually prescribe protocols and incorporate certain drugs to keep their estrogen levels lower so that the inflammation profile of their cycle is different compared to someone without endometriosis. So that's important to me to factor in. And so that's what I mean by individualized care. And I feel like patients respond to that because to them, that's important, right? My doctor sees me. Like my doctor designed a protocol based on my endometriosis. That's important.
It is. So thank you, ladies, for we've been going for an hour. This has been great. We're getting good feedback. So just some last comments, Jaya, anything that you want to say? The reason why I brought Jaya on was because like I was with them.
Yeah.
During this time, and I call my nephew my little miracle baby or the miracle baby because we had kind of given up. And we're just having fun, drinking rum punches in Barbados.
Yeah, and just sweating. Yeah.
So, and I look at her as a story of hope for many women who might be trying, and they didn't have to use IVF, but that might be your path to use IVF. But I just wanted to give you guys some hope by having her on. So, Jaya, any last words for us?
Yeah, no, I mean, everything that Dr. Cindy has said is totally true. I think one other thing I would add is just, we have to have these conversations with our mothers and our aunts and our grandmothers too, because also knowing what's in your family, endometriosis could run in my family. I have no idea. Same with fibroids. And so I think knowing your family's profile is helpful just in terms of, understanding yourself as well. Understanding all the options that are available to you are important, along with their costs. There's a reason we were able to get really good care in South Africa. It was very affordable. I don't know what that would look like in the US, but understanding that and also kind of planning for a financial horizon as well with your treatment. And then, just knowing and really looking critically at your diet and your exercise habits and the impact that is going to have on your reproductive system.
We didn't talk about cost, Dr. Cindy. Can we briefly, before I'm going to real next time, but...
You're right. So cost varies, and in different markets, meaning different parts of the country, the cost in the United States varies. They can vary by up to $5,000 even if you're paying out of pocket. Like I said, for a lot of places now, actually there's 16 states, 16, where fertility coverage is mandated or semi-mandated, which means the state itself has enacted laws that say that fertility should be covered. And so it's important to know that. But again, for a lot of us, when we're choosing our insurance benefits, the word fertility isn't written there. So you literally have to ask someone who is in that area to tell you which of these plans is going to cover your interest for fertility treatment. But for those who don't have coverage, then it becomes a question of paying out of pocket. And so fertility treatments, let's say, for example, you're doing insemination. Insemination cycles are going to run you somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000 per cycle, and on average, people need 2 cycles.
Does that include the cost of the sperm donation? If you're doing sperm donation,
sperm donation, no. And so sperm donation can cost anywhere between $400, meaning if you're using a sperm bank, it can cost you anywhere between $400 and as much as $1,200 every time you use sperm if you're doing insemination, or what we call intrauterine insemination, previously known as artificial insemination. So it can cost that. In vitro IVF, that's where we take the eggs from your body or from a donor and put it together with sperm in the laboratory, create the embryos, and then put them back into the womb of either yourself or surrogate, someone carrying the babies for you. In vitro can run anywhere from around $10,000 US to as much as $25,000, depending on the market. And so I know at first people are like, oh my God, that's high. But keep in mind, a really fun vacation for a couple, let's say you're going to Bali, you're running that much anyway. So the bigger question also is, if you're someone who has to prioritize cost, asking yourself, what am I willing to forego this year to get that? But also there are a lot of discount programs, lots of discount programs. I actually have an ebook coming out that outlines all of those programs. There are also grants. So there are actually grants, more and more coming up, including one called Fertility for Colored Girls. It's actually funded through one of the companies, the drug companies that makes the medications, but it's funded through this charity, Fertility for Colored Girls. There's another one called the Tanina Q Cade Foundation, C-A-D-E.
Spell that?
The Cade Foundation, so C-A-D-E. And again, they have grants. You have to apply for them. They're competitive, but they will cover an entire IVF cycle for you, including medications. There's one company known as Fertility IQ. They usually give out lots of grants of about $1,000, but every so often during the year, they'll give out grants of $10,000 to cover IVF. So there are lots of programs to cover. There are some religious organizations. So like there's a Jewish foundation for anyone of Jewish heritage who they will, if you apply and you qualify, they will cover your in vitro fertilization cycle. So like at my clinic, we make that list available to our patients so they can start looking into it. But we also give discounts other than that. So for our first responders, firefighters, police officers, EMTs, emergency responders, we give them a discount off their cycles. Currently, we're running a discount program for teachers. They're on break. If you're looking for your family, we're offering a discount. So there are lots of ways. I would say the first step is calling in for that visit, getting your fertility checked out. Having your fertility checked does not mean you have to then do treatment. There's nothing that says you have to. You're just getting it checked out. So keep that in mind. And there was something else I wanted to share based on what Joya was saying. Now I've forgotten, but if it comes
So
back.
what about if you had to get an egg donation? What is the cost of that?
So egg donation, there are two ways to go about getting an egg donor. So there's called the directed route, which is using someone you know, or you can go the route of anonymous donation, or nowadays we call it de-identified donation. And that's because nothing is truly anonymous anymore with the age of 23andMe and Ancestry.com. But they're not identified to you, you're not identified to them. And so you can either go through nowadays an egg bank, which is actually the most cost affordable way, is you can go through egg banks. In the United States, there are 6 established, recognized commercial egg banks via the Food and Drug Administration's accreditation system. And so you can purchase eggs from there and they ship it anywhere around the country and actually anywhere around the world. Now, there are egg banks outside of the United States. However, based on FDA regulations, if you are based in the United States, you can't ship eggs in from other countries. And so you usually have to use one of the egg banks here. Now, a lot of fertility clinics also have their own private egg bank, and you can also talk to them about that. So that's one way. With those, you can end up paying somewhere between $12,000 to $20,000, all costs included, through your pregnancy.
And all costs, including IVF and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As if you're using an egg bank. You can also go through an agency. Let's say you're someone and you're really specific. Maybe you're Dr. Kelly and you want an egg donor. She has to be from Barbados. She has to be from Bridgetown. She has to be from a certain area code in Bridgetown. She has to be an exact height. She has to have gone to an exact college. Then you can use an agency and they will find someone for you. Those tend to cost more, obviously, because the agency will have their fee for finding the donor. If the donor is not located near your clinic, you probably have to pay for that donor to travel to the part of the country you're in, pay for their IVF cycle, pay for their medications. And so those can easily run you well over $30,000, but again, this is where you're getting very specific. And also, though, the difference, one key difference, is if you're getting a donor through an agency, many times all of the donor's eggs are yours. If she has 30 eggs harvested, retrieved, they're yours. Whereas with the egg banks, you're usually purchasing 6 to 8 eggs.
Okay. So I just wanted to go through the options because there's so many options. We talked about egg preservation if you wanted to use your eggs later. We talked about intrauterine IUI, right? We talked about IVF. We talked about donor eggs, and it's even surrogacy where you can use your own egg that was fertilized, or even a donor egg that was fertilized in a surrogate. So there are different levels of what you can do.
And they afford you pregnancy at most ages. So, for a lot of women out there, the concept is if you've had menopause, that's it. Shop's closed. You're not having children. But the truth is, for us in the world of fertility, if you're otherwise healthy and this were your interest, we can get you pregnant even after menopause. We probably have to use donor eggs, though. Yes. And so I have patients who are years postmenopausal. They haven't had a period in 5 years, 10 years, right? But now they're begin to start their families. And so we can do that. It's a conversation. It's an exploration because we have to see how you feel about it. Many times it involves sitting and talking with a psychologist just to work through your feelings about it. But what I say is if you're someone who has a question, an interest, you're not sure, there are options. I wouldn't just shut the door because you turn 49. I won't shut the door because you turn 51. As a matter of fact, most clinics in the United States will get you pregnant up and through age 55.
So you heard that, guys?
That's amazing.
If you're otherwise healthy.
Yes.
Up until age 55, otherwise healthy, you still have options if getting pregnant is what you desire. And even from my own story, for women who are single,
yes,
who want to get pregnant, who want to use your own eggs, for egg preservation is an option for you too. I know when I was doing it, I had 2 friends who had also done it before. And just having people that I can talk to who had gone through the same process, took the same hormones, felt the same abdominal cramping was invaluable during that time because part of me felt like I was alone, and just having them there was helpful. So we need to have these conversations, ladies, with each other a lot more often. So Dr. Cindy, any final words for you before we go?
I remember what I was going to say, and the opportunities for talking about this. So it shouldn't just be during these live sessions. You can have these conversations as part of a shower. You can have these conversations at church. When you're at church having that prayer session so that sister can find the right mate. Also make sure you're giving up egg freezing.
Yeah,
we shouldn't just have our sisters out there forced to end up in relationships that they already know won't work out, but they feel like they're racing the clock. Give yourself options. Talk about egg freezing. Talk about single parenting by choice. Talk about options for childbearing in your 40s, post-40, post-menopausal. There are options. Talk about how amazing the gift of surrogacy, gestational carrier is. I think what's amazing in the fertility space, for all women to talk about it, but it's especially heartwarming to see Michelle Obama come out and say, you know what, these 2 beautiful girls that everybody really looks up to and sees as perfect children, they're IVF babies. So for a lot of people in the communities of color who thought somehow IVF meant your kids will not be your kids, you get to see, of course they are. Gabrielle Union coming out and sharing that she used a surrogate after years of miscarriage. Tyra Banks using a surrogate after years of miscarriage. Who most recently? From Escape. She's Real Housewives of Atlanta. Candid Barris for sure. She
did it too.
Yeah, she did. And so we have a lot, but also to our male counterparts out there, our LGBT sisters and brothers out there, also knowing that there are options for you. And I will let you know, especially this is Pride Month, there are options. You don't have to feel isolated. I've met patients who said, I'm gay, so obviously I can't have children. Well, that's not true. And you just need to talk to someone like me. But, you don't have to feel pressured, but you also don't have to feel like somehow who you are relegates you to not being a parent. That is not true.
Anderson Cooper just had his little son that the whole world knows. Quiet.
Andy from
Andy Cohen.
Andy via surrogate. And so there's just so many people. Lance Bass and his husband had a baby using a surrogate. Lots of people. And it's not just for the rich. It's not just for the wealthy.
Sometimes it appears that way, to be honest, Dr. Cindy, especially the surrogacy part. That, I know it can run like tens of thousands of dollars, right?
It runs tens of thousands, especially when you're using a surrogate who is someone you're compensating. But, you know, I would tell you that for me here in Las Vegas, a lot of us surrogates are family members. A lot of us surrogates are best friends. A lot of us surrogates are people who work together. And so in that case, the agreement is different. You still need a lawyer, obviously, and there are fees involved, but the agreement is different and doesn't necessarily involve compensation. It's not the, oh, I buy you a house kind of compensation. But yes, it can be pricey at first, but again, priorities, right? Maybe in your family, you know, because if you're using a surrogate, again, time takes on a different meaning. So, you know, a surrogate, but you're using your eggs, you can take your eggs out, create your embryos, freeze them, and then work for a year or two to save the money to carry your baby, right? Or find the person who's going to help you carry your baby. I had one patient, this is unique, but her sister was supposed to be her surrogate, but then she got pregnant. So she had the baby, and then after she was done breastfeeding, she came and carried her sister's baby. And
wow.
Yeah. So, you know, again, it's all about what I've learned in this field is it's about your priorities. It's about what's important to you. It's about where do you want things to land in the end. And, you know, for people who complain about egg freezing and the storage, right? It costs somewhere between $500 to $600 a year to store.
Yes.
But if you're someone, for example, who can't do without her Starbucks in the morning, you're spending more than $40 a month easily on Starbucks, which is your storage money.
Great. Dr. Cindy, thank you so very much. Where can people find you? This is your tag, right?
This is my tag, all social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find me at Dr. Cindy M. Duke. My website, drcindyduke.com, has a lot of really cool information. You can find out all about me. You can find out about my clinic in Nevada, Nevada Fertility Institute, but also I have a virtual clinic based in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago Center for Comprehensive Women's Health.
In Barbados, she has a virtual clinic in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes. I know Barbados has its own fertility clinic, and I know
More had her baby here.
Yeah, and so but I'm happy to talk, happy to give you information, happy to refer you to others, happy to have you come see me if you need to, happy to have you see me in Trinidad when I'm there or virtually. But the key is talking to someone. You know, for me, I see patients from all over the world. I have a patient I talked to just last week from Hungary. And she's like, I'm coming to Vegas. It's not a question. And I was like, okay.
If I ever have to use those babies are coming, those eggs are coming with me to Vegas.
We have people ship their eggs. We have excellent thaw rates and fertilization rates and pregnancy rates and quite a few babies. I mean, more than, at this point, 3 handfuls of babies born from thawed eggs. And so it's really important to know that kind of stuff and to have that confidence that your clinic is doing everything they can. And we're not the only clinic doing that either, just to be clear.
Right. Well, thank you, Dr. Cindy. Thank you, Jaya. You're the first member on this show. Thank you for coming on, being so transparent with your story. And guys, I didn't see many questions. I don't know why, but if you want to send me an inbox to ask your question, I can pass it on and get some information for you. Thank you for coming on, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye.